So good evening, everyone. It's March 23rd, 2026. It is now 5:41 p.m. and we are here to discuss wetland map updates. There is currently no one here in person with us, and I believe 9 of you attending virtually on the Teams. I am Crystal Sewell, District Wetlands Ecologist for Franklin and Grand Isle County, and with me is Julie Follansby, District Wetlands Ecologist for Orange County. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to the public shortly after the meeting ends. Some virtual housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking, and videos off to preserve bandwidth. Please raise your hand or type your questions into the chat. Specific questions to clarify a slide can be asked as we move through the presentation. Please hold location-specific or more in-depth questions until the end. Julie will check for questions in the chat and raised hands at the end of each topic before moving to the next. Our agenda today is to review the maps being updated, which areas of the state draft mapping are up for public comment, why they are being updated, and how to review those changes and provide the ability for the public to provide comments and ask questions. 3 ways to comment here today, which there is no one here, but maybe someone could join us as we move forward, either verbally or in written form, via the environmental notice bulletin, and using the review map to provide comments on specific locations. This slide provides an overview of the different wetland maps available for use within Vermont. The National Wetlands Inventory, NWI, is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service program established in 1977 that maps and classifies the extent, characteristics, and status of U.S. wetlands and deep water habitats. It provides publicly available geospatial data and is used by government agencies, stakeholders, and private landowners. When the Vermont wetland rules were adopted in 1990, the NWI mapping then in use served as the basis for the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory. Wetlands added to the NWI must meet specific procedures and are subject to Fish and Wildlife Service review and approval. The Vermont Significant Wetland Inventory, the subject of today's updates, is managed by Vermont DEC and shows regulated Class 1 and Class 2 wetlands. These wetlands meet the requirement of providing significant function and value as defined by the Vermont wetland rules. The rules initially limited protection to mapped wetlands and those contiguous to mapped wetlands. As the program developed, it became apparent through field verification, advances in mapping technology, and basin-wide assessments that substantial wetland acreage, particularly forested wetlands, smaller systems, especially those associated with streams, and farm wetlands were not mapped, and that many of these wetlands are significant. This led to the 2010 Vermont Wetland Rules revision, which brought unmapped wetlands presumed to be Class 2 under state jurisdiction based on scientific criteria. The Fish and Wildlife Service has approved the mapping updates, and they can currently be seen on federal maps. To update the VSWI, we are required to engage in this formal approval process of statewide noticing and public engagement. In addition to the basin-wide updates through NWI, the VSWI maps are also updated with delineations. The advisory layer is an informal, non-regulatory layer managed by Vermont DEC, is available to the public, and is regularly updated with staff field observations and aerial interpretation to provide a flexible tool to assist the public in visualizing wetlands. If you take a look at the images on the slide, they are all of the same location in Middlebury, showing how wetlands do or do not show up on different mapping layers. The current VSWI does not have any Class 2 wetland polygons. The mapping completed to NWI protocol as part of this update, which is proposed to be added to the VSWI, and the advisory layer. These mapping layers have several useful and appropriate functions. They are helpful for landowners who are interested in developing or who want to learn more about their ecology, as well as for interested buyers and real estate agents. They can help identify recreational opportunities and provide important preliminary site data. The Army Corps Wetland Delineation Manual recommends using NWI mapping for preliminary work before heading into the field. None of these maps can identify every wetland or take the place of on-the-ground site work because they are developed at a zoomed-out scale. It is important to note that newly mapped wetland areas are not increasing how much wetland is subject to state jurisdiction. Any wetlands added to the VSWI meet Class 2 significance and were protected in their unmapped state, just as significant wetlands that were not picked up and remain unmapped are still jurisdictional. These updates help visualize wetlands that were not on the maps before and refine some previously mapped wetlands with improved technology. These updates also result in removing some mapping from the maps due to better technology or identifying where some polygons have been offset, for example. As mentioned, the NWI is created at a zoomed out scale. Where the protocol detects a wetland, there is a wetland in the general area. Forested, small, narrow wetlands and farmed wetlands are hard to see and are often left out. The maps cannot be used to find the boundary of a wetland, and they cannot determine the absence of wetlands. Therefore, they cannot tell you if a state wetland permit is needed for a project or be used to determine what impacts to a wetland are being proposed for a project. Combined with other recent map updates, approximately 80% of Vermont's wetland maps will soon be current. The updates are required by the Flood Safety Act, Act 121, passed in 2024, and are ahead of the timeline established by law. The Missisquoi River basins were updated and completed in early 2023. Then the Winooski, Otter Creek, Little Otter, Lewis Creek, and Pike River were completed in 2025. Our meeting today concerns the proposed update to the Connecticut River Basin and Northern Lake Champlain direct drainages. These draft updates to the state wetland maps show the approximate location and shape of wetlands across major parts of Caledonia, Windham, Windsor, Grand Isle, and Essex counties, and cover over 45% of Vermont. The mapping work was completed by the outside contractor Geospatial Services with St. Mary's University in Minnesota. Their team has a long-standing history of collaboration with state and federal agencies to update the National Wetlands Inventory. DEC anticipates placing the remaining areas of Vermont, about 20% of the state, on notice this year. Here's a zoomed-in look at the update areas. On the left, you can see the northern lake towns with drainage directly into Lake Champlain. These include towns as far north as Alburgh and to the southern extents of Charlotte and Heinsberg. The Connecticut Basin on the right covers the entire eastern border of the state, from Canaan up north down to Reedsboro. This update covers 150 towns, but what you'll notice is that some towns may only have a part of their town involved in the update. This is because the mapping efforts are broken down by drainage basins and not town or county borders. So why are we updating the wetland maps? The maps are a frequently used tool for project and regulatory planning, provide important preliminary information about an area, and are required by law to be updated. Before this proposed update, much of the state was last mapped over 30 years ago and missed a significant amount of wetland area. The technology has come a long way since the 1970s, when maps were hand-drawn by aerial photo interpreters. The image on the right side of the slide shows the aerial image year the maps were hand-drawn from and later derived by digital and GIS methods. This update comes with improvements such as corrections like you see here, where a wetland polygon was misplaced and appeared on top of a house instead of an actual wetland. Boundaries are also refined, since in many cases, improved technology has made it possible to better see these areas. These boundaries are still approximate and would need to be evaluated in the field to determine the true boundary of the wetland. Some wetlands are being removed or reduced in size as part of this work. Again, any newly mapped areas that are in the mapping updates are wetlands that meet Class 2 criteria and have been protected despite being previously unmapped. Any significant wetlands not picked up that remain unmapped are similarly protected under the Vermont wetland rules. So now let's talk about how you can review the proposed VSWI updates and make location-specific comments if desired. Julie will provide a link in the chat. When you click on that link, this page will open up on your screen. At the top left-hand side of the web page, there's an address box that you can plug in your address or location of interest. The black outline shows the wetland as seen on current maps, and the teal is the updated mapping that is up for public comment. Town names and streams are not up for comment. That is just a base layer to show the wetlands and where they are geographically. You can see there are wetlands that have been corrected, such as the wetland in the bottom middle that was previously overmapped. Wetlands that have been newly added, such as the top middle of the image, and the one circled in red. If you want to look closer at a polygon, you will select it, which we can demonstrate on this encircled one. So once you select a polygon, an attribute table will pop up, providing information about the wetland, such as its NWI code relating to the vegetation and hydrology, and details pertaining to landscape position and water body type, size in acres, and who mapped it. You are also able to provide comment for this area by selecting Report Comment at the bottom left. Please be aware that after you click on a polygon, you will need to click on the Clear Search Location button at the top of the map to go back to seeing all of the information on the map. When you select Report Comment, a new window will open, prompting you to enter your email address and your comments. Site-specific comments can include information you have about the extent and location of a mapped wetland, if it is an error, such as a manure pit that has been incorrectly mapped, etc. In addition to providing location-specific comments through this online mapper, you can provide comments here today and/or through written comments to the environmental notice bulletin. So before we wrap up, we want to share a breakdown of some numbers that provide context and that you may find interesting. Looking at the Northern Lake Champlain Direct, 3 counties and 25 towns are included in the updates. 138 locations were assessed in the field. While there was an overall increase in identified wetland area by 11%, Alberg specifically has 23% less area mapped, with a decrease of 1,558 acres. However, South Hero saw a 10% increase of mapped area, with an increase of 119 acres. Many of these towns span more than one basin, so we do not have a total percent change for those areas, just how much they changed within the basin. The Connecticut River Basin update covers 10 counties and 125 towns, with 635 locations assessed in the field. Basin-wide, there was an increase of wetland area identified by 117%. Woodstock saw a 144% increase in wetland area detected, an increase in 384 acres. However, Westminster had a 96% decrease in wetland area detected with the removal of 1,446 acres. It's also important to note that identified wetland areas significantly overlap with river corridors and significant natural communities in both basins. So this concludes the informational presentation. Public comments will be accepted through April 3rd, 2026. And we can now open our meeting up so that you can provide comments or ask questions. If there are any in the chat, Julie can start with those, and then feel free to raise your hand.
Did not see any come through in the chat.
Okay. Does anyone wish to unmute themselves and ask a question or provide comment?
I see your hand, Tabby.
Hi, this is Tabby Friedman from West Dover. I did put in a written comment on the area that I was concerned about, but there wasn't a way that I could add. I created sort of a comparison side-by-side image of what the proposed wetland area is and what the current VSWI image was, and I think having that ability to send whoever is reviewing it a comparison might help the process. But I did have my regional wetland person, Rebecca Chalmers, take a walk with me through the property, and we kind of did a walk and observation in the field, and then the updates come out with a considerable amount more that is proposed category 2, but yet that doesn't really map up with the field environment. So would that, as part of this review, would that have to be re-walked by somebody, or how would that work?
Thank you, Tabby. I believe commenting through the ENB, you can add attachments.
Yes, and if you made a comment, if you mentioned, did you mention the visit that you had done with Rebecca?
Let me pull up the text of what I commented. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, so I guess the general answer to the general question, like if I have a comment and it requires more conversation about a specific wetland, then we can be following up with people after this update goes through, because we now have the ability to make site-specific changes going forward. So we would follow up and be able to put changes into the map queue for the next update. But I'll also note that it is a mapping exercise, so it doesn't change where the wetland is and where the regulated wetland is on your property. It just changes how it is depicted on the map. But we can certainly work with you to update according to what the findings were in the field.
That would be great, because depending on how things look, and I have worked closely with Rebecca, my regional person before on a couple of different things. So I did make some notes on this about the Rumney Fine Sandy Loam area, etc. But I did not state that it had been reviewed previously, but when you look at it, you can see Rebecca's project number on that. So I guess I'll wait to hear from somebody and then we can go through it in more detail.
Okay, and I took a note down here for you as well.
Great, thank you. Because I'm sure, I mean, I'm also, floodplain administrator and all of that. My question is pertaining to my property specifically, but I can guarantee I'm going to be getting more questions from my community. So this way, at least I have a way to get that reported up or whatever needs to
Yes.
happen.
Yep,
Great, thank you.
you're welcome. The next question is, when will the new maps be published and in effect?
But Nate,
Yes.
thank you, Nate. So we will be collecting written comments through April 3rd. And then if there's no delays from there, I don't think we have a specific date, but our team that works on mapping and getting things updated will be hopefully able to get those up as soon as possible. We can ask Laura, our program manager, if there's a projected date when they'll be available to the public and follow up.
We're hopeful to have it for this field season, though. From Lynn Machman, I have not had a site wetlands assessment, but wonder how soil types are considered in making accurate assessments. The new proposed area includes soil types known to be excessively draining and highly unlikely to be wetland. How to proceed? So if you think that your wetland that you are looking at is not actually wetland, then that would be, we would suggest making a comment in the map tool that, and providing whatever evidence you might have, such as what you've provided here. And we can follow up this field season and try to get out at least this field season and take a look to confirm conditions out there. That would be our recommendation. If you have a specific project that you're wanting to do, then we would recommend going to our webpage and going into the contacts and submitting an inquiry form so that we can do a desktop assessment and potentially a site visit for a project. And Lynn, if I did not answer your question, and feel free to raise your hand or ask for further clarification. From Joe Berard, are town rights of ways going to be affected in class 4s and town trails to make them unusable? I might need a little clarification there, Joe, but again, these maps are providing further clarification of where jurisdictional wetlands likely exist on the landscape already. And we do have, for certain infrastructure, does get, what am I trying to say?
Allowed uses.
Yeah.
So things like trails that are currently in existence today can continue to be used as they have been. The new maps just visualize where wetlands are on the landscape and provides changes to areas that we can see better. It doesn't mean that that land then needs to have its use changed. Even if these wetlands were not mapped previously, but they were significant, so class 2, any future projects would need review by the program, potentially permits, depending on what the projects are, but trails can continue to be used as they have been. These mapping updates don't impact that.
Okay, I was just wondering, because we have a few town trails and stuff that are, you see the new maps and it, all of a sudden there's big sections of a class 4 or town trail that go through a wetland, and I didn't want to see them end up getting closed off or something like that.
For sure, and that can help town staff also know that they may need to reach out to us for improvements to those trails or help replacing culverts for water quality issues. Which again, even if those wetlands were unmapped, oftentimes our program will provide guidance, but the updated mapping also gives a clue that there may be some other folks to reach out to before starting a project.
Would this also equate to like existing like residential driveways or that type of stuff?
So hopefully there wouldn't be a lot of mapping that extended over existing drives. This mapping is of a better accuracy than our old maps, the last round of maps. And so I think you'll find that will be overlapping less with things like existing driveways and roads. And if there is a mapping overlap, we're still really looking at what is actually on the ground in terms of infrastructure. So if there is a driveway there that's been there since 1985 and there's a wetland map on it, that doesn't mean that that driveway is now a wetland. These are really just intended to provide more clarity as to approximate locations of wetlands.
Okay, thank you.
We're here for a few more minutes, but if we encourage folks to take a look at the maps in their area or areas of interest, places that they hike. If you have questions or have comments, please, reach out. I put both of those links in there if you want to make comments about a specific wetland polygon. The mapping tool is probably your best bet. If you have more general comments, then the EMB is a good way to get those comments logged. And Tabby, I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I'm back. Okay, this is sort of a general overall zoning question. As I look across Dover, West Dover and East Dover, the new maps have a massive increase in the amount of Class 2 wetlands that are being designated. That is potentially going to add several layers onto our zoning process. And is there going to be any clear way where I can have people, I do have people look at the wetland, I'm blanking out on the name, but the wetland inquiry tool and various other things like that. But I can just see this overwhelming our region with people who want to build. We've got quite a bit going on. And the costs involved, potential costs involved. Is there going to be any guidance on that or some sort of a streamlined process?
Thanks, Tabby. I think it's important to reiterate that these are not new Class 2 wetlands being designated. These new areas that you're seeing help visualize Class 2 wetlands that were already protected by the state in their unmapped state. So while maybe it's kind of a shock to see, this may actually be beneficial for those projects because folks are having a heads up earlier in the process that they may have wetlands, may need state permits, may need to contact a wetland consultant and think about permitting.
Yeah, as I just sort of go back through, there may have been some wetland areas that were not necessarily obvious, but not showing on any of the maps before this update.
Mhm.
So they may have been physically, were they areas that were wet land or were they wetlands? But there are some places that I just looking around through the maps that are just not necessarily wetlands that will need further review, but looking back at any of the previous maps that were available, including through the inquiry tool, none of that showed anywhere except for over the past couple of months. So
The intention, the goal of this project is to better depict the wetlands that are already on the landscape. And there are many pretty cryptic wetland types like seeps that can be hard to see certain times of the year. So if there are areas, and maybe you're seeing that there's a neighborhood that appears to be mapped inaccurately, that is definitely something we can check out. But we have a pretty high level of confidence that areas that are identified as wetlands on this map are in the approximate, I mean, they're not accurate boundaries, but we expect to find wetlands in these areas, and they're areas that we expect are already protected as categorical or contiguous wetlands.
okay, yeah, again, it's sometimes some of the borders of that. I guess I'll go through that with my regional
Yeah, we'll let
consultant,
Rebecca
but there's,
know what your
yeah.
concerns are,
Mhm.
so she can be expecting a call.
Yeah. That will be great. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Lynn, can you let us know what links you're looking for? Was that the contact and inquiry form? Someone's still on. I think we were talking about site visits and
Oh,
desktop reviews.
yep.
Thanks, Tabby.
Anything else coming up for people?
Hi, I am Isabel Bone. I work for the Windham County Conservation District. I was curious if it sounds like the maps were done by an outside company group, and I didn't know the best way, or if this was already incorporated, but a group of conservation districts along the Connecticut River did desktop reviews and some VRAM surveys of wetlands. And it's a lot of data. I didn't know the best way to share that data or if it's already being shared. I don't know if you will know the answer to that. But.
So I know the VRAMs that's the Vermont Rapid Assessment Methodology, is of interest to our bioassessment program. So that would be Charlie Hone.
Okay.
And he might also be a good person to share the mapping with, because he does a lot of the mapping and also does restoration monitoring. And has done some of the quality checks for this statewide mapping exercise. Can't tell you sitting here whether that data would be able to be used to incorporate into this mapping, but it certainly could inform future rounds, because we do intend to be updating these statewide maps on a rotating basis and on an individual basis as certain site-specific mapping changes are identified that need to be done. But we do intend to continue to update the whole state as well.
Isabel, the
Okay.
maps being added to the NWI do have to go through Fish and Wildlife's protocol to be approved. But as we mentioned while going through VSWI updates, in addition to what Julie just shared, we update the maps with delineations provided by contractors. So you can share that data, and we'll work on putting confirmed delineations on the maps.
Contractors and consultants.
Great, thank you.
From Lynn, what if the excessive draining site in question that is now mapped as wetland is undergoing perk testing this week for Vermont wastewater permitting? Can we proceed without redoing the effort?
Lynn, soil tests and perk testing are allowed to be conducted and move forward. I think it's important to note that if that area is showing wetland on the updated maps, there may be wetlands nearby, and scheduling a site visit or a desktop review with the district wetland ecologist is probably a good first step. Well, Wetland ID is conducted in the growing season, which hopefully will come soon. It's been a long winter. I can't speak for the ecologist who would be making that site visit. We're all scheduling out early spring. You're also welcome to reach out to a wetland consultant who may be able to get on site sooner when the growing season begins. However, I think Julie's gonna pop in some ways to get a hold of our program to help you get on the list for early season site visits as soon as possible.
Typically, if we're talking Connecticut River Basin, it's between May 1st and, if you're really up in the mountains, May 30th for the growing season to begin. So if you go to our contact page, there's a link to request a site review or a project review. We can start with a desktop review and provide you a lot of information about the site and process, as well as a consultant list. And then you can also request a site visit at that same link. And so that would be a good first step for that. Your wastewater designer also may have some thoughts once they do pits on what the wetland conditions are on this site. You're welcome.
Any other thoughts?
We appreciate your time and interest and comments.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we will conclude our meeting here at 6:21 p.m. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.